Sunday. How are you? How was your weekend? What did you get up to? Let me know in the comments below. Well, it happened to me. Like many YouTubers before me, I recorded a video and it didn't record the sound. So today's gonna be a voiceover, chilled, sew along vibes. I hope you stick around and you can watch me make the Painter's Smock dress. So I saw so many people who have tested the Painter's Smock dress or have bought the pattern and made it themselves, and there's so many cool variations out there. So I wanted to make another version drawing inspiration from what I'd seen. So I decided to go for a chiffon and gingham mix because there's so many different panels and all of the gathers, and obviously the sleeve caps on the dress. I thought I could play around with different fabric and see kind of how it works with the gathers and creating that shape. So you might have seen in my vlog a few weeks ago that I got some fabric from Minerva, a lovely kind of chartreuse green gingham and also some chartreuse chiffon. It's one of those colours that I really love, and I know other people do like and some people hate as well, because you could maybe call it kind of like a poopy green. But I think with the right styling, it can look really cool. And I wanted to play with the chiffon as well, so it could be kind of like an over outfit shirt dress. So you could wear it with maybe like a plain top and some jeans, and then you have this amazing kind of colourful, voluminous dress over the top. So stick around, grab a cup of coffee or tea, or maybe a glass of wine, whatever you fancy, and let's sew the Painter's Smock. So first things first, we're gonna prep our placket pieces, and we'll fold over the seam allowance on one of the sides of the plackets, and then fold over again to the markings on the pattern, and we'll stitch that down and create a really clean placket on our front two top pieces. And all the raw edges are going to be concealed within that placket and leave us a really clean placket to add our buttons to. And obviously you need to repeat that to the other side. Now, I don't always do this step, but because we're adding a collar stand and collar, you can often stretch that neckline. So it is wise, if you choose to, stay stitch that neckline. So within the seam allowance, you just want to do a short stitch all the way around that neckline piece, and that just means you're going to prevent any stretching when we're adding our collar stand later on. Once both of your plackets are prepped, we can take the front piece, and along the top curved edge we can do our gather stitching. Now, I do only gather using one stitch. I find on most fabrics that's enough if you're using really good thread, but best practice is to do 2 stitches with a super long stitch on your machine, and you don't back stitch the edges, and then you can pull on those threads and gather up the fabric really nicely. So we want to gather up that front piece, and then we can add that to our plackets. I find it's best to pin the plackets as if they've got the buttons on, so it becomes one piece, and then you can use the bottom edge of your placket pieces to make sure that you're gathering it to match that length, and then you can pin that gathered front piece to your plackets, and we can sew that. And once we've got that sewn down, it looks so cute. You've got such a nice movement in that front piece, and you're not necessarily going to want to press this. I'd steam it with your iron just so that you don't crush any of those really nice gathers. Now we need to do the same to the back piece. So the yoke is already in one piece, so we'll gather the lower back piece and we'll attach it to the yoke piece the same as we did with the front. So do your gathering stitches, pull on those threads and line it up with the yoke, and then you can attach the yoke to the back piece, and you'll have your front and the back of your smock dress done. And we can attach them at the shoulder seams using a 1 centimeter seam allowance. So you're going to want to attach them together with some pins or some clips and just stitch across both of those shoulder seams. So I didn't mention at the beginning, but I actually overlocked all my pieces beforehand. If you don't have an overlocker or a serger, you can zigzag stitch around all your edges just to stop any fraying. We do have the placket piece and the collar and the cuffs concealing some of the raw edges, but you will have edges on the side seams. But let's move on to the collar. So we'll take our collar pieces, and I've interfaced these just to give it a bit more structure, but depending on your fabric, you might not have to do this. Place them right sides together, and we're going to stitch around the short edge all the way around the long edge, pivoting at the corner, and then back down the other side, leaving the bottom open. And once you've done that, don't forget to clip those points so that we can get really sharp edges when we turn it out and give it a good press. I sometimes use a pin just to help ease out some of those corners as well to get a sharp point. And once we've done that, we're going to top stitch around the entire collar. Collar stands can be a little bit fiddly, but we want to sandwich our collar in between our collar stand pieces so they're right sides together facing that collar, and we'll sew around the curved edge on each side going all the way across and down on the other edge. And it's always good to clip those curved corners as well, because when we fold it through and press it, we'll again get a really clean curved edge. So after a good press, we can attach our collar stand to our smock dress. And I always start on the inside. So I take one edge of the collar stand and pin it around the entire of the neckline and sew 1 centimeter seam allowance. So I've only attached one side of the collar stand. And that means when I flip that out, I can then go around the right side of the dress, the part that's on the outside, and fold under the rest of that seam allowance, making sure that it's hitting the edge of the side of the collar stand that I've just sewn, so that all of the edges line up really neatly. I can give that a good press if I need to, and then I can top stitch the collar stand to finish attaching it to the dress. This is the bit that can be a little bit tricky, but if you can line up that outside edge to the inside edge that you've sewn, when you're top stitching, you can ensure that you're then catching that inside as well. I definitely recommend going slow and using as many pins as you have. You could always base this as well. And here's me trying it on, just making sure that everything looks nice and dancing around in my studio with a flowy smock. Now with the side seam still open, I like to attach my sleeve cap. So I'll place that on top of the curved edge and sew that in place. And then that just means when we gather the rest of the sleeve to the sleeve cap, all we have to do is sew down the side of the sleeve and then all the way down the side of the smock dress in one stitch. So I really like this method when I'm inserting sleeves. You can sew up the side seam and input the sleeve and then stitch around. But actually, if you leave the side seams open, your pieces are flat, and you can sew in the kind of the shoulder cap of your sleeve, even if it's one piece sleeve, or like what we're doing here, it's a cap and the sleeve body, which will be gathered. And because the side seam's open, once we've attached the sleeve, we can just sew down this edge up to the armpit and then all the way down to the bottom of the dress. or t-shirt or shirt, whatever you're sewing. But it just allows us to keep this seam really kind of clean and make sure that we're matching the points. And all you need to do is just pivot at this corner here. And once we've done that, we can attach our cuffs. We'll fold our cuff pieces in half and sew them down one of those edges. And I always put a little kind of notch in the seam allowance, which I'll tell you about in a second. But now I'm adding in the seam allowance 1 centimeter on both of the edges, just so that when I fold it in half, it's a really clean edge. And that clip that we've put in basically allows us to distribute the seam allowance, removing any bulk when we do fold it in half. And like we did with the collar stand, do use a lot of pins when you're attaching the cuff. And all I've done is inserted the bottom gather of the sleeve into that cuff and concealing it, and then I'll just top stitch around. And then all that's left to do is hem the bottom of your smock. So I hope you enjoyed that sew along. It wasn't a tutorial. If you do want to make your own smock dress, you can go and get the pattern from the website, and it will come with all of the instructions showing you how to do every step. And I would love to see your versions of the smock dress or any other versions of the Painters collection that you've made. So please do make sure you share with me your makes, and I will see you next week. I hope you have a great week. Bye.